All right, so the session is being recorded. Again, I want to welcome you. The presentation is going to follow the following format. Each panelist will have about 10 minutes to present. The first 5 to 7 minutes will be to provide a brief overview of their problem management practice or process, with a few minutes left over for questions. Please note, pay attention to the presentation as you might hear your questions that you submitted earlier being addressed. Everyone will be on mute. Oh, and we will use the time left over at the end of the last presentation for Q&A. So use the chat, please, to talk to your peers, but use the Q&A to ask questions. It's easier for me to monitor the Q&A. So please use that to ask your questions. Again, the webinar, this event is being recorded and will be available on the ITSM website within 5 business days. Without further ado, let's jump in. So learning objectives, we hope that you walk away today learning tips on how to start your problem management practice. You'll hear and see from the panelists how they've implemented their problem management practice within their ITSM tool, and be able to hear the answers to some of the questions that you sent in. I want to thank those of you that are on the call that sent your questions in. It's very helpful to us, and we want to, just be able to acknowledge that and thank you for that. All right, today's panelists, we have Katie Demore, she's a problem manager from Boston University. We have Gino Bonetti, who's a problem owner for problem change and major incident at UC San Diego. Then we have Marianne Miller, who's the problem process owner at the Service Management Office at Princeton University. And our last but not least panelist is Christina Foster. She's the manager of the IT Service Management at George Washington University. The panelists have included their contact information and have more information about themselves that they will present. All right, I'd like to hand this off to Katie, who will start the presentation.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well, yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Katie Demore, and I just see a typo in my slide. I apologize. I'm at Boston University, not Boston University. I have been doing problem management here at BU since 2018. Prior to that, I worked for Oracle, and prior to that, I worked at Sun Microsystems doing escalation management. Next slide, please. Okay, so I just wanted to talk about a little bit about problem management at BU. When I came to BU, we had a backlog of problems, about 300 of them, and they realized they needed somebody to sort of take charge of the practice. And so that is why I came to BU. And the scope of what we use problem management for right now at BU is all priority 1 incidents. And then we also use the problem practice for recurring P2 incidents. So if we keep seeing the same incident over and over, and we either have different root cause analysis or the same one, we know something's wrong, we will use the problem practice there. And we also will use problem management upon request for lower priority incidents. That can be anyone from our CIO to a service owner or a concerned technical support person who has 6 P3s, and it could get worse. The tool that we use at BU is ServiceNow. Right now, we're using a customized problem module, and that is because back when this was implemented, which was before my time, there was a lot of functionality that we needed that wasn't in the tool yet. However, since then, ServiceNow has evolved quite a bit, and we will be moving to their out-of-box problem management module next year. Next slide, please. I wanted to just quickly explain the way we do the problem practice at BU with a brief flow visual. So first, a major incident happens, primarily P1s. And once it's resolved, a problem ticket is created. And one thing that we do here at BU is we have an after action review for every major incident that has a problem opened. And on Ital Island, that is referred to as a major incident review, but we do it out of the problem ticket rather than within the major incident ticket. So the problem practice manager, that's me, I will schedule an after action meeting, and I will invite the folks who worked the issue, the service owners for both the impacted and responsible services. We have a meeting, we basically talk about what happened, why it happened, or if we don't have enough info, we will create action items which translate into problem tasks. And then after we've had the meeting and we've agreed upon our next steps, we assign the problem to the service owner of the service that we believe caused the issue. The other thing that we do, or that I do as the practice owner, is I write an AAR summary report for each problem, and I send it to our CIO, and all of the folks that are involved in the AAR are CC'd, and I give them all a chance to look at it before I send it. That's sort of our flow in a nutshell. This is just me basically writing out what I just told you. So I think we can probably skip over this. Some of the questions that I saw that I wanted to answer, one of the questions that we had was, what Ital practices did BU or other universities have in place before adopting problem management? In our case, we have incident, change, config, service continuity, and service catalog management. Those were all in place before we embarked on the problem management process. Next slide. Another question I saw was, how do you scale problem management for a small institution with limited resources? Well, we here at BU, which is actually a really big university, but we don't have unlimited resources. That's a problem we've had to grapple with as well, which is one of the reasons why at BU, we really only use the problem for P1 incidents, the highest priority incidents. One of the things, so you could do that where you narrow down only dealing with the most visible incidents to start with. The other way you could do it is have service owners own the process rather than having a problem manager manage everything. Or you could train a small group of people to help manage the practice. So those are some of my suggestions for scaling. There was a question about problems related to change. It is true that changes often trigger incidents and problems. 50% of BU's major incidents last year were caused by changes. Robust testing should be part of the change process. However, there are always test escapes, and there are situations that aren't anticipated that happen. And that's one of the reasons we have the after action meetings, because we can use those meetings to understand where we may have not tested fully, and we can take actions to prevent it in the future. The only downside of the after action meetings is that it's hard to scale it unless you have multiple people trained and able to run those meetings. Next slide. My final thoughts are just that the AAR meeting with the subsequent report to our CIO helps keep everybody accountable. So everyone knows that our CIO knows what's going on, and will sometimes ask questions, and usually reads every single one of these. But as I said earlier, it can be hard to scale that. Getting a group of people from different areas to talk about an incident without making it seem like we're blaming people is an art. We're really not trying to blame people. We're just trying to focus on continuous improvement. But you have to be careful in how you run the meetings, because folks can be sensitive, which, is just human nature. Sometimes service owners who get the problem after the meeting, they might need help going back and making sure open tasks are completed. So sometimes I will help with that. You can use things like reporting, aging task reports, to help people see where they may have some aging problem tasks. I think that's my last slide.
So as mentioned, we have a few minutes at the end of each panelists for questions. So if you have, we can take a couple questions if you have some now. If not, feel free to drop them into the Q&A. If you want to ask a question now, let me know. By raising your hand, I'll take you off mute. And we'll give it a couple of seconds of awkward silence and then move on to our next panelist. Okay, Deb is asking, how is problem management different for an IT department in a university setting versus a profit-driven industry?
That's a good question, but I'm not sure I know the answer. I mean, my only experience, I wasn't a problem manager in my prior life, but I was an escalation manager in a corporate setting. And in that situation, we really owed the customer a very detailed explanation. So it happens faster, I think, in a corporate setting, at least if the problem impacted your external clients. Some sort of meeting has to be held with a root cause report. So I don't know if that really answers the question. Maybe somebody else knows. We called it escalation management at Oracle and Sun. In terms of, what I should have done and didn't do was include a picture of the AAR summary. But basically, first we list the incident number and how many child incidents. That will show us the impact. We list the impacted services. We list the time, the duration of the incident, and then we go into describing the problem, describing how we restored service, describing what the cause was. If we don't know the cause, then we outline the steps we're going to take to try to find it. Or in the situation where we have insufficient data, we might outline what we're going to do if it happens again to get the correct data. We also talk about what we call aggravating factors, which are defined as things that made the problem worse. That could be anything from someone not responding to a page to someone leaving out documentation in the change request, that if it had been there, the outage wouldn't have lasted as long. The rest of the report will have has an additional information section, and then there's a table of problem tasks, which is basically an outline of action items and who will do what. And those are also in the tool we use, ServiceNow. We have tasks created in the problem to correspond to that. I hope that answers your question.
What I'll do is I'll confer with the panelists to see if there's any resources or artifacts that they're willing to share with the group. Okay. I do see your question, JP, but let's move on to Gino, our next panelist, and then we'll circle back to any unanswered questions.
Hi, this is Gino Bonetti, and I'm from UC San Diego, and I have a couple of areas of responsibility. And while they seem separate, they are not. They are actually very much woven together. Problem, major incident, and change. It's major incident, not the general incident process there, because that's so major incident's a bit of a specialty. And I'm interested in different processes working together. You can see why. I mean, part of what I do is work with these three different processes, make sure they're working together. And I have come from a variety of small and large organizations. I've been a consultant in smaller organizations, but I've also been in some large organizations like Intuit and CA, which was formerly known as Computer Associates. But UC San Diego is the largest enterprise I've ever been associated with. It turns out it really is a big organization. Next slide, please. So I thought it would be worthwhile starting with the journey, how things got started. And essentially, I don't think this is very different from any other organization. And basically these things here, having confusion, either no process or no defined process, or a lack of confidence in the process. And, tempers flaring up for meetings that try to deal in root cause or try to dig into the details of what happened. These are all motivations. These are things that drive to the next level. And we had all these. And a lot of them were before I joined the organization, but not entirely. I saw these things in effect. There was no lack of, there was no confidence in the process. And that was the biggest thing. The need was there. All of these things demonstrate need. The need was there. And so why wasn't it working? So that's sort of the launching point. So if you're experiencing these things, it's a pretty good clue that you need to have a good problem management process. So yes, please, next slide. So what happened next? A couple of concrete actions, and mostly getting somebody responsible for managing the two processes. No process can just exist and operate. It doesn't happen that way, well, even though people like to think that you just put a flow out there and say go and everything should be fine. Not true. It won't work. You need people who are responsible for making sure the process works. So we ended up with a problem manager and a major incident manager to oversee those processes. And those were the big ones. And making sure that the type of information you're going to collect and the type of, mostly it was about questions being asked, what kind of questions you ask. Make it not personal. If you ask, what did you do? Or what did you do wrong? You're going to make somebody bristle and they're not going to be comfortable in telling you the story. But if you're looking for, we're trying to improve things. So give us the layout of the sequence of events and how did things go awry. You're not telling people you messed up. And that is huge. That approach will permit or entice people to participate. But by far the biggest one is the action items. If you track the action items and you and they happen, and people are accountable for making those things take place, that's where the confidence in the process comes. Not only you make it not personal, you gather information, but you make sure that the things that you talk about that need to get done are done, then, things change. Now, establishing these things doesn't mean life is wonderful and that's the end of it. But it's the building blocks. Having these things in place are the building blocks for how to move forward. So next slide, please. So we've taken a Lean Six Sigma approach to problem management. So we started with the building blocks, and then we took a Lean Six Sigma approach. So the actual form we use ServiceNow as well. The actual form has the DMAIC fields in it to help guide people through the different flows in the process. And those two processes that I mentioned earlier, they developed at the same time, but they're independent processes. They leverage one another, but they don't depend on one another. You can have a major incident, but you don't have to have a problem. Not necessarily. And you can have a problem and you don't have to have a major incident associated with it. So we've sort of categorized problems in three ways. And we have after action reviews, we have problem reports, and we have process improvements. Now they're all tickets, they're all problem tickets. after action review in our case is reserved for some incidents which are highly impactful, and they have caused just huge amounts of impact across the organization. And those things have a very formal process that it goes through, and there's some detailed documentation requirements to go through that process. And going through an after action review is about a 3-month long thing. And you can see why that's reserved for particular kinds of events, because you can't do that for everything, and you shouldn't try. But for those things that are really nasty, yes, you want to go through the details and really ferret out the problems, because you try to avoid those in the future. Problem reports are they're driven by incidents primarily. That's where they come from. And so they could be a major incident, or they could just be a pattern of incidents that you want to address. But they're about things that keep popping up that you want to address them. So a major incident can occur, and if it gets a problem report, then the action items will be associated with the problem report. Now, the reason we started with 1-for-1, major incident will generate a problem report, but we found that there are instances of certain kinds of failures where things didn't go wrong. Something broke, for instance, a piece of equipment, it broke, and it was repaired according to standard operating procedures, and it's not a problem. Yes, it caused an outage. Yes, customers were upset. But as far as corrective actions, there really wasn't any. So we just have a post-incident review with a small set of people. We use the major incident to document the discussion, and then we decide whether a problem report is generated. And then we use the DMAIC process in the problem report to go through the details. And then there's the third, it's a process improvement ticket. And these are just generated for any reason whatsoever. If somebody wants one because they have a good idea and they want to vet it and they want to engage people, then you make it a problem. You categorize it as a process improvement problem ticket, which sort of confuses people, because why is process improvement a problem? It's just the module that's being used. And so we try not to get hung up on the name, but it's basically a process improvement effort. And next. So these things all have led to some organizational type changes. And because we've taken a Lean Six Sigma approach, and we want service owners to be accountable, because there are too many for one person to deal with. So service owners are engaged, and they have to generate 6. Now those 6 problem reports, those can be regular problem reports or process improvements, any combination. And some organizations have more than 6 because they have incidents that require them, so they get them quickly. But others generate process improvement tickets because they work towards trying to improve their services. But these things, we want people to be forward thinking, and so more process improvement problem tickets is the way we see that as the way to go, because it's the difference between being proactive and reactive. If you're being proactive about trying to reduce issues that come up or that could come up, you're you're going to make your process, your service better. If you make it better because something happened, well, you're making it better, and there's nothing wrong with that. But trying to be more proactive is the way we're going. That's what we're trying to do. We are in no way, shape, or form done or calling any of this, a great victory. This is all works in progress. And the biggest challenge we have right now is making people understand that this is just normal. Problems are just part of the way normal business is conducted, and having people to generate them on their own rather than be assigned. So that would be an indication of people being comfortable with the process, understanding the process, and using it to their advantage. Having these problem reports makes review time so much easier, because you can count these things and say, these are the things that we have done over time to make our service better. And I believe that's my last slide.
Yeah, there's always an amount of technical debt left over. That's a good candidate for problem.
Yes.
I have two questions. We'll jump into the Q&A that's been asked with the 2 minutes remaining for Gino. So let's dive into that. So Vernon's asking, which came first, Lean Six Sigma or the ITSM problem management?
ITSM problem management came first because that was sort of the module. Well, we actually evolved out of an older ticketing system into ServiceNow, but even that older system had an ITSM sort of background to it. So that came first. And then we had a CIO who was very much a supporter of Lean Six Sigma, and the organization has developed and trained everybody, at least as a yellow belt, as a white belt. No, yellow belt. That's the first one. And so everybody's had some exposure to it. So it came second, and I think it was an improvement.
All right, let's do this for the sake of time. Let's move on to Marion and Anne and JP. I do see your questions. We'll circle back at the end. Marion, are you with us?
Oops, forgot to unmute. My apologies.
I was
How
just gonna
often
ask
do
that.
we say that?
That's right. That's right.
So I'm Marianne Miller. I'm a senior process manager in the service management office at Princeton University. I am the problem management process owner at the current time, and provide process support for incident management. I provide support for major incident management and change management as well. I've been with Princeton since 2005, and prior to going into the service management office, I worked at and managed the support desk for 12 years. So I've been involved with service delivery for quite a while. A little bit about Princeton, just to give you an idea. We're a liberal arts institution located in beautiful Princeton, New Jersey. We have an undergraduate enrollment of a little over 5,000 students and graduate enrollment of close to 3,000. So, problem management at Princeton. So when we started using ServiceNow in 2016, we were following Ital v3. We implemented problem management in about the spring of 2018, and when we implemented it, we already had incident request, knowledge, major incident, and change out there. The way we decided to implement problem management was we did a pilot. So in the spring of 2018, we got about 15 people who we felt were very engaged problem solvers. We created the process, rolled it out and trained them, had them use it for a while, got their feedback, and then we rolled it out to the organization later that fall. So a problem management process follows the activities that are outlined in Ital. I will say that the activities are not prescriptive. We don't require you to do every single activity because every problem is different. And one of the things that I have highlighted on the slide is the importance of an assessment. So assessment is important during each of the activities. Initially, is it really a problem? After you decide it's really a problem, do we really need root cause analysis? Do we have a good solution? Should we implement the solution? What is the cost and the resources needed? What's the risk of doing nothing? And what is the risk of implementing a temporary or permanent workaround instead of a solution? So we try to emphasize during each of these process activities that it's very customized to the problem at hand, and encourage a lot of assessment along the way, because again, the problem process is not prescriptive. It's not you must do this, you must do that, but follow the process, and the process will guide you where you need to go. Thank you. So we do our problem management process in ServiceNow. We did not use the out-of-the-box application in ServiceNow because in 2018, as Katie had mentioned before, there was a lot of functionality that we wanted in the problem process that just did not appear on the out-of-the-box forms. Wanted a ServiceNow problem form that covered all of the activities in the problem management process and not just a ticket. We didn't want a ticketing system. I wanted a form that would guide people through the process and make the process work. Next slide. So what we did was, the goal was to have everything in the problem record. So, before the process was in ServiceNow, we had emails going back and forth. We had phone calls. We had, maybe a ticket here, a ticket there, and it's very difficult to have a good problem process and a good analysis of a problem without trying to get everything about the problem all together in one place. So the form was designed to collect all the information you would eventually need to do an effective analysis of the problem, the investigation, document any workarounds, root causes, solutions, even vendor and supplier. If you were opening up a ticket with a vendor or supplier, we had a place to log that, so that 2-3 months from now, if you go back to the problem record, my hope was that there would be enough information in that problem record to get an idea of what we went through, what we did, what we didn't do, the parameters of the problem itself. I felt like, documentation, writing it down in the problem record really enhanced the critical thinking that you needed to do throughout the problem life cycle. If people didn't write things down and documenting, we felt like, was it yesterday or the day before that this happened? What were the symptoms we saw? What were the steps we took immediately after this started happening? And that stuff gets lost in people's emails or in people's brains. So wanted this form to kind of be able to capture that, and also capture all the related tasks. My colleague, previous panelists mentioned opening up problem tasks to take care of all the actions that needed to be taken care of, and recording the number of incidents that happened to be involved with this problem, and anything else that came up along the way, I would hope would be logged in the problem record. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a quote that I really like. It says, "The measure of success is not whether you've had a tough problem to deal with, but whether it's the same problem you had last year." So, and I think that kind of captures a lot of what we're trying to accomplish here. We want to be successful, and we want to look at these problems and say we don't want to have to deal with them next year or next month or next week. We want to try and find a solution or a workaround or something so that we're not dealing with the same problems over and over and over again. So we want to take a deep dive, determine root cause, or solve the problems in lieu of just constantly addressing symptoms. So the next slides I want to talk to you about is keys that I feel would lead to a successful problem management process. And I am still, obviously, like my other former panelists, it's a work in progress. We're constantly trying to do this better. So support, it doesn't need to be said that support from senior IT leadership is important in any process. Support from the IT middle managers and engaged staff at all levels was also something that I feel is important. We did have senior management behind us when we launched the problem management. They were very much behind us. And, we like the other panelists, we generate a problem record for all major incidents. In our case, within a week of resolving the major incident, we have a meeting with all the parties that are involved, the major incident process owner, the service desk, and try and collect all the data and investigation data that we need, and all the some after action reviews of what happened during the major incident, all in hopes of supporting some type of analysis of if we can come up with root causes or contributing causes for what happened. The middle managers is difficult. Middle managers know there are problems that need to be addressed, but having a formal process out there was hard. Still continues to be a little hard because most middle managers are busy. They keep their lists, they keep their stickies, they keep their whiteboards of things that they want to tackle when they get to it. But putting them into a formal process and creating a ticket is a challenge. And I would say that staff is also, they're busy working on projects, they're busy working on all kinds of things. So they want to fix the incident, but after the incident is over, it's really easy to forget about problem management. So getting all staff at all levels engaged in the problem process is a real important key to success. So you've all seen this face. Tell me again why I should care. And having a clear vision and purpose with the process is very important. Having a well-defined and documented process is important. And communicating and training is very important, because you will get that face. Something goes wrong and you say, hey, open a problem record for it. And like, oh, why? Why do I have to do that? How is this going to help me? Because I'm really busy, and you need to be able to demonstrate that what's in it for them, basically, because technical staff are problem solvers. They want to solve problems, but using a process and understanding why they have to go through the process and do a deeper dive is the hard sell, I think, in this case. Next slide. So incident management. I really feel like if you don't have a good incident management process, you're not going to have a very good problem management process. So you really got to put some time into having a good incident management process. Reactive problems become very apparent when there's an incident. Something's broken, something's malfunctioning, and most of our problems records do start with an incident or a major incident. So there has to be a lot of synergy between the processes. And one of the things I noted with our incident process at times too is there's a lack of good data in the incident record and reporting of the incident record. So there's an incident, something's broken, and you'll see an incident ticket that says fixed or done or whatever without any troubleshooting listed or any symptoms listed. So when you go to review incidents to say, gee, let's look for trends, let's see if there's a problem here, you're lacking data that's very important to an analysis for a problem. So we need to get a really good incident management process going. Also, I found, if a customer doesn't report an incident, sometimes service owners don't log the incident. Something may get broken, some service may go down, and they may fix it pretty quickly. And we don't get any calls at the help desk or whatever with regards to that service, but it was still an incident, and things like that should be recorded so that we can look back over the tickets and see if there is a problem. Next slide. So The other thing that I notice is people have a real hard time understanding what the difference between an incident and a problem is. An incident being, according to Ital, unplanned interruption of a service or a reduction in quality. Problem is more looking at the underlying cause of one or more incidents so that we can prevent it from happening again. So my way of explaining this to people is, you all hopefully are familiar with the Apollo 13 issue and probably the movie and the quote where Houston says, "We've got a problem." And I'd like to tell people that Houston, we've got an incident, not a problem. We don't want to call the astronauts who were fighting for their lives and tell them, yeah, next Tuesday, we're going to do a root cause analysis and we're probably going to plan a change for the next change window. And that's problem management. So Houston, the astronauts really had an incident, and that's the difference. An incident where you're trying to get service back up as soon as you possibly can. And once the dust settles, then we want to go back and say, okay, you know, let's work together and see what caused that particular incident. Next slide, please. So when does an incident become a problem? And like some of my panelists in the case of Princeton, we automatically create a major incident or a problem record after every major incident. I'd also like to see problem records created where, you know, the service owner is aware that there's probably something going on and they think it's going to happen again. Trying to get people to, you know, voluntarily create problem records, as Gino mentioned, is a challenge. Multiple occurrences of the same or similar service disruptions, even if it doesn't cause a major incident, is also a good place to create a problem record. And the other thing I would note is that log the problem sooner rather than later. So I would be aware of a problem and I would contact service owner and say, hey, you know, I think we need a problem record on this. And I would get, well, wait, we're still investigating it and we're still working on it. So we'll create the problem record later, because it seemed there was a perception that the problem record is just to document what they already did, as opposed to using the problem record as a living document to guide the investigation. And I think if if you wait to put the problem record in too late, you're causing confirmation bias, because people want to assume, yeah, it's the network, so we're going to do this investigation and follow what we think is the problem, as opposed to doing the investigation. So I think it's really important to get a problem record on the books as soon as possible, especially when the symptoms and the investigation data are fresh in your mind. Next slide. And finally, foster a problem management mindset. Don't just ask what caused the incident. Once the service is restored, start thinking about the underlying problem. For example, we've had a problem where a database filled up and the database server fell over. So you could say that the problem was, you know, we ran out of space, we gave it more space, we're done. But what we want to do with problem management is to say, well, why did it run out of space? Did you change the application? Was the database undersized from the beginning? You know, what changes were made that caused the database to fill up and fall over? Was it a process problem? What is it? Was it a people problem? You know, did we not know enough about the application to understand, you know, our database? So things like that are very important to make them consider all the potential factors and try and do the why kind of thing. And finally, another theme, be objective and eliminate blame. I think one of the things I was most surprised with the problem process is people very hesitant to participate because they didn't want to place blame on everyone. So we have to make sure that we're really objective and we're not really looking to blame anyone. We're looking for process improvements and improvements to our service. So, and I am done. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Marianne. Some of the panelists have offered to stay on a little bit longer after the event officially ends. So if you want to stay on to get some of your questions answered, feel free. We're going to move on to our next and last panelist, Christina.
Hello, I am Christina Foster. I am the manager of IT Service Management for George Washington University. Very passionate about connecting the dots for GW. I've been with GW only since April of 2020, so it's been an interesting transition. But before that, I did start my IT career with the University of Oklahoma, where I served in a similar role. And before that, I worked for the aerospace industry for about 8 years as an aerospace engineer. Go ahead, next slide. So I just really wanted to give you guys an example. We're a problem management program in transition. So as a lot of universities have experienced over the last year, we've gone through a lot of organizational changes. And so our original state, we had rotating responsibilities for our problem managers that rotated amongst the directors within IT. They would get the call if there was an issue, they would hand it off to the teams that were responsible. It really didn't provide a whole lot of consistency within the program, but it also did provide the benefit of it reduced burnout. No one person was on the hook on a consistent basis to make sure that problems were getting solved and that they were moving through the process. We currently use Remedy. We have a built-in AAR form. We have a built-in, it doesn't quite move through the process. It also has a lot of fields that we're not quite using at the moment. Go ahead, next slide. And so when we reorged in October 2020, we did a full centralization of IT, and we had a decentralized, centralized model before. We are now a fully centralized model of IT. So we absorbed a lot of departments. We absorbed a lot of employees, a lot of services that were not ours. And in that process, we decided to also centralize the responsibility of problem management. It's not that it can't be handled by the service owners, that they can't be the problem managers. It was just the fact that we wanted to provide some consistency. With so much change, we wanted to be able to give that organization a little bit more structure from leadership and strategy. So we decided, so that's when I became the problem manager, in the way that we felt that it was really important that we were providing somebody that was not looking for something being wrong. How do we build relationships across IT so that we're willing to openly talk about the problems that we're having and create safe spaces? The weekly meetings that were being held before, there was a lot of finger pointing. And so by consolidating that responsibility, a lot of that has been removed from the meetings. We have a weekly meeting where I lead it and we talk through the problems in a very fact-driven form. It's not who did what, it's we had this problem, this is how we fixed it, or this is what we're still working on to fix it. And we're able to get past a lot of the feelings that were there before that felt a little more like finger pointing or teams against teams. So there's a lot more collaborative energy there. We are responsible for making sure that the ARs are completed. They're responsible for making sure that all of the problems move through the process. And it also gives people one stop to ask questions. Before, when each director was kind of doing it, it depended on who you talked to on what was actually needed. And so we've been able to centralize those responsibilities and make sure that we're giving consistent answers. It also allowed us to really increase communication. And so that was another place we were struggling within the major incidents at the time. Was we were struggling with communication from the beginning of the incidents all the way through the end of what we are doing. So we've been able to consolidate that. We rolled out GW status this summer, which helps us during the incidents to make sure we're communicating with not only IT, but with our community. And then afterwards, we're able to target those areas that if it's a major incident, we had a major data center heating issue over last Christmas, we were able to target who do we need to talk to. By consolidating that communication, it moves along a lot faster. Also through this transitioning, we're researching, do we want to transition tools to streamline the process, make sure we're using all the fields that we have. Go ahead, next slide. We're having challenges. Like I said, we have a lot of new service owners and a lot of new services. And so that's another place where we felt like centralizing who is responsible would help support those new services and new service owners a little bit better. I don't think it's one of those let's start now, let's start little, let's make sure that we understand this process and we have a consistent team that can push it through. We're also having tool difficulty, teaching new users how to use the process the way it was designed when we're kind of in the middle of a transition. What does that look like? What fields do we want to require and which ones not? And then always communication. How are we making sure people know what they need to be doing and when it needs to be done? We all have a lot on our plates because we have a lot of new services, a lot of new service owners. So the reason we really decided to make this one of our initial pushes to not implement problem management, but to continue with it and start to transition it into a leaner process was it really helps us at the end of the day. If we can make sure that we're not repeating problems, then we can make sure that we're reducing the number of incidents that come in. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Christina. We are 5 minutes to the end of the event. All of the panelists can stay on. So if you've got some extra time and want to stay on, we'd love for you to continue the conversation. We have a couple minutes, so let me get to some of the questions that were asked prior. We'll take a couple. So let's go back to a question that JP asked to one of the panelists. Is there an estimate of the minimum impact cost threshold that needs to be met before a problem process gets triggered?
This is Katie. I tried to answer that. At BU, that's why we focus on major incidents, specifically P1 major incidents, because those just by definition have the largest impact on the community. That's why we don't do it for every single incident.
Sure. I heard a stat average is $9,000 a minute for a major incident.
Yeah.
All right, so great. So Anne, this is your question. How long did it take to implement the problem management process? How long did it really take to take hold and to start seeing benefits?
I can say that we've been doing it for almost 3 years now, and we're still tweaking and trying to get people to embrace the process for what it's worth. I think when we started enforcing that problem records had to be generated from major incidents, and so people generally accepted that, yeah, I have to do a problem record for this, and we started having those analysis meetings, and people came out of those meetings feeling a whole lot better about their problem than before. That I think that was a step in the right direction, but I think it's a work in progress.
Absolutely.
I have to echo the same. I have to echo the same sentiment. Every year it gets a little bit better, and we get better at making the process do what it needs to do for our customers. But it's we still have a long way to go before we can say the whole organization has adopted it and it's working for everybody, or for 80 or 90%. We've got a long way to go still.
Any other panelists want to comment on that, or?
I think they covered it.
Okay. I want to go back to a question that Deb had asked. I know that Katie, you answered in chat. Did anyone else want to add to this? I think this was a great question. It was about addressing duplication of effort. So in ServiceNow, for example, the incident module has a lot of the same questions that are in the problem record. So how do you avoid some of that duplication?
Well, I can just repeat my answer to start. There's some duplication, but in terms of the questions asked, I don't believe there's that much. When we create a problem in ServiceNow, we automatically grab information from the incident, such as the resolution note, which, as Marianne noted, is often "I fixed it" or "resolved," which is not helpful. But the questions that are unique to problem are more about, what caused this. So we handle it by automating as much as we can, and we try not, we have customization, but we try not to duplicate what we're asking in the customization of either form.
Yeah. What I'd like to see from our MI record to our problem record, which is something we want to do, is for it to carry over. I know we try and record the number of incidents that contributed to the major incident, and we'd like that information to come over to the problem record, because every incident record is a piece of investigation data that will help with the analysis of the problem at a later time. So while it doesn't do it now, there are things that, yes, I would like to have our developers work in ServiceNow to be able to pull some of that information over, make it consistent.
We are doing that, Marianne, just so you know, but it was a customization. So
Yeah.
we pull all of the incidents, including the child of the major incidents, so that we have a true count. And that's kind of answering part of the metric. Well, no, maybe it doesn't answer it. It just shows the impact of how many incidents did you solve, or how many incidents have you won't repeat because you solved this problem. That's one of the metrics we use. I kind of jumped to a later question, sorry.
Good.
Yeah.
Let me get to JP's question before I jump off, because I know he's been holding on for a while, and this is for Gino. This is, how do you communicate the difference between a process improvement and a change request?
Process improvement and a change request. Well, there are two different modules in the system, so they do two separate things. But if there's a relationship, it's primarily a problem will lead to a change. In other words, once the resolution is understood and decided upon, that would turn into a change request, which would then be implemented. So that's how they would work together, but they are two different animals, and they serve two different purposes. The problem being for the analysis, the change would be for the actual implementation of that, of whatever came out of the problem.
All right, just a reminder, we're at the top of the hour. Our panelists can stay on. Got to do a quick little conclusion. Thank you for attending. I appreciate panelists for giving your insights and your thoughts. Their contact information is in the deck. There's going to be a lot of great events coming up through the end of the year, so keep a lookout for announcements that are going to come out. If you want to present and you have a message and a story, I have a stage, so reach out to me, mpouts@usc.edu, and I will work with you to get something together. Again, thank you so much for your time, and thank you again for your panelists. Now we'll just kick it off to just enjoy this time that you can give to us. Anyone have any questions? Go ahead and you can raise your hands if you want to stay on. We're going to dwindle down our numbers here, so I can take people off mute if you want to ask a question.
Well, I see.
Yeah, good.
I see a question from Deb. The kind of reports that we send to exec. I happen to have a CIO who is very detail oriented and super smart and really likes to read the reports. So it's a high level report, but it hits on the important pieces, the things that she may need to know if she gets asked by a peer, you know, why was the registration system down for 3 hours? So it gives her the high level talking points that she needs to explain to her peers what happened, but also I think it lets her see that, you know, what we're doing to prevent this from repeating. I don't know if that really answers the question. I'm going to try to send us an example of what it is. Not right now, but I need to get our template and put in some fake but realistic data so you guys can see it.
Yes. Protect the innocent.
Yeah.
And she, you know, will notice if she doesn't see them. When I came, I remember she said, I haven't seen an AAR summary in a long time. So I think it depends. It can't be overly detailed. It has to hit the sweet spot of giving them what they need to know, but not making it so high level that it doesn't make any sense.
For the sake of the 15 that are still on, I'll read some questions that came into the Q&A. So Kim had asked, how do you measure the value of a problem practice, and how do you justify the overhead? And do you use metrics to justify?
I will say for us, we're working through that. What makes sense? How do we really use metrics to justify where we're looking what are we collecting? That's something we've struggled with, but something we're working through. But I do think that repeating of things, and this is the incidents that are attached, does tell a story. And if you can say, we're not going to repeat this, that's a number that we can present.
So I took everyone, I gave everyone the ability to take themselves off mute. So if they want to just jump in and start asking questions, we'd love to hear from you. The last question here, and that's still in the chat, or sorry, in the Q&A. How do you capture costs and resources involved for a major incident to justify problem management cost savings? Kind of related to the last question.
So at UCSD, we generate an outage record. So that's one of the things that we concentrate on in the initial post-incident review, where we decide whether to go on with a problem report or not. So we generate an outage record, and that gives a indication of impact, because there's a time, but it doesn't tell all the impact. The other thing that we do is we log time that people spend on major incidents. There's a timing system that we have for general, how do you use your time during your day? Well, we generate one for every major incident, and then we send that out for people to log their time. And and that's where we actually get numbers, and those numbers can be directly associated with cost. And it is very surprising how big those numbers can be.
Well, Michael's asking a question, but why don't you take yourself off mute? We can have a very intimate discussion. Yeah.
I was just curious, the one director who had taken over the position of problem manager, I'm kind of in a similar position where I'm considering doing the same thing. And I was just curious what percentage of your time, say a week or a month, would you estimate goes into being a problem manager?
That's a great question.
It depends on the week or the month. Right now, we're having a major storage issue with one of our departments that's taking up a lot of my time. There are other weeks where, because problem manager is not my only job, it is, but there are weeks where it takes up a majority of the week, which can sidetrack with the other things that you're trying to do. But then there's weeks that are quiet and I don't do much for it. And so I think it really depends. It really does depend on the week. And it is one of those things that some personalities are great with that and can deal with that kind of unpredictability of, hey, today is just not, I lost the whole day to this problem. Others are not. And I think if it's something that you're passionate about, though, you'll find a way to do it, this was not something I had to take on. It was something I was asked, did I want to? And I see the value in it. And so to me, it was important enough that I wanted to do it.
I can answer too. This is Katie. When I think that, as Marianne said, it's feast or famine. There are some weeks where you might have like a horrible P1 problem that keeps happening because they're having trouble finding the cause, and that can take up your whole week. But then you might have times where there aren't a lot of new incidents, major incidents. I think when I first started, it was all consuming, but then as the problem manager, or if you had a team, as they get more comfortable with the process and have some sort of SOPs in place, then I think you can do that and other things. But it also depends on the volume. So at BU, we do major P1 incidents and recurring P2s, and then upon request, if we did this for every single incident, it would be, one person could not do that, assuming you have like 500 incidents a day or more. So
that makes perfect sense. I was curious about kind of because I've read in problem management, two categories, proactive and reactive.
Yeah.
And it would seem, though, with major incidents and maybe even problem requests, that would take up enough time where it would be difficult to be proactive, or you have teams maybe digging in to find significant problems or problems out there and then prioritize and then start working through those.
And I will
Yeah.
say
I
right
agree.
now, we're very much reactive, working towards being more proactive. And I will tell you, at University of Oklahoma, we got to the point where we were more proactive. We're not quite there yet at GW. And happy to talk outside this meeting if you want to talk more.
Okay, yes, thank you. That was very helpful.
Yeah, one of the things that usually comes along with those resourcing questions and how much time is devoted to each practice or process is, what processes make sense to put together, right? In Ital v3, you had like, okay, well, incident and change goes together, problem and config or whatever my case may be, but it's finding the right resources and combining paths so that they don't cause conflicts or overlap. So if you put problem and incident together, it's probably not a good fit, because incidents will often take precedence over, managing your problems, right? And then how many resources do you devote to data analysis versus just managing the practice? So lots of great resourcing type of questions and potential conflicts. Christine had a question here. What happens when you realize part of the problem was actually caused by a human? Let me add something real quick to that, Christine. I heard someone once say that at the root of all of the root causes is a process. Even if people may cause the issue, it's because something wasn't right in the process. So I always tend to say, I tend to take the blame away from humans directly, put it more on a process. Does anybody else have comments? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree. There's got to be a training issue or a process documentation issue or a flaw in the process or doing it too quickly, doing it at the wrong time. There's so many things that, and most of the time it's not an individual HR problem.
And as a problem manager, we don't necessarily have to point those things out. We just need to point out where in the process it failed. If you're having somebody that's repeatedly having problems with the process, then their managers already know and they will handle that.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I was asking, I don't think it shows where I'm from. I'm from a medical university, and we've adopted a procedure called Just Culture. And part of the overall hospital activity is when something goes wrong, you go down these Just Culture algorithms. And the first question is usually, did the human know better? Did the human mean to do it? So the idea that I couldn't have known better, you dear manager, figure it out.
I mean, I guess,
Yeah.
so sometimes
No,
I
and
might,
that's fine. And
No,
I
no,
really
that's
very much
interesting.
appreciated Christina's answer. I think it was Christina.
yeah,
That
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm interrupting you. I didn't mean to.
That's
I
okay.
might say something is a human error, but it's usually in most cases, and I've been doing this for about 3.5 years now, it's not that the person is incompetent. It's usually the human made an error because the process has
That's
a
right.
flaw.
That's right.
So
Research shows that too.
yeah. So I mean, sure, there might be a situation, most of the time, if somebody did something wrong, we find out there's no standard operating procedure. So they were going on the fly. So then the corrective action is that the group that is responsible for whatever the change was, they have to come up with a standard operating procedure.
Yeah, and the Just Culture algorithm would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put a link in the chat. Hopefully it's the right link. I did a quick Google search.
But I mean, we've seen things that were repeated problems that they were not following process. And when we handled that from the problem management side, we noted where that there was a process breakdown. But we never stated people, and people know who those people are, and they handle that in a different way. We never had to address it in the problem management process.
Yeah. So we've had to address it in the problem management. We've had instances where somebody will have work they have planned and they set out to execute at the time they need to. And then, out of the corner of their eye, they see something, well, that doesn't look right. Let me take care of that since I'm right here. Well, That's the one that caused the outage, not the planned work that they were doing, but the thing that they just sort of ad hoc did. And so that is sort of a process issue. And we sort of got around that, not got around it, but sort of mitigated it by saying, have a checklist of things that you're going to do to implement and stick to the checklist. Don't try to go outside. Make a note of it, but don't try to fix it, because without proper analysis, you don't know if you're going to cause trouble or not. And the people who can cause the most trouble, most amount of impact in the organization, are the people that have the most amount of authority, the widest scope of, permissions, and they're the most experienced too, and they can cause the most amount. So if they stick to what they're doing, then they tend not to get into trouble or cause trouble either.
Yeah, let's be conscientious of time and not keep everyone too
Yeah.
long. This has been great just to have you guys stay on long. I would add one piece of advice. The biggest two challenges I've seen with problem management is the blame culture, right? Avoiding blame culture is one. And two is adequate and effective problem management techniques, whether it's using Kepner-Trago or Lean Six Sigma. That's really where the rubber hits the road for the problem management process. So thank you everyone for your time and for staying over. This all has been recorded, so you'll get everything that has gone on this last hour and 15 minutes. I will provide the contact information and other things that you've all asked for. So thank you for your time and have a great day.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.